Billionaire X believes she was happy with someone else until he saw the twin girls. Everything changed. She stood there in an emerald gown, worth more than most people's yearly salary, flanked by two 7-year-old girls whose gray-green eyes held a secret that was about to shatter everything Robert Alvarez thought he knew about the last 7 years of his life. Daniel is my brother, Robert. My half-brother. Elizabeth's voice cut through the private lounge like shattered glass, and Robert felt the blood drain from his face as the words registered. Your brother, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. The man I was meeting at that restaurant. The man you saw me holding hands with. The man whose kiss on my cheek made you decide our entire relationship was a lie. He grew up in foster care because our father abandoned both our mothers. I found him 6 months before that dinner. It was only the 3rd time we had ever met. We were holding hands because we were both crying about the years we lost. Robert staggered backward, catching himself on the edge of a chair as 7 years of certainty crumbled into dust. I was going to tell you about him that night, Elizabeth continued, her voice breaking despite her determination to stay strong. I had a whole plan. Dinner at home, the photo album I had been putting together, the story of how I found him. But you were not there. You were never there again. You ended 7 years of my life based on what you thought you saw. You did not ask. You did not confront me. You just disappeared. Robert sank into the chair, his legs unable to hold him anymore. Outside the door, somewhere in that glittering ballroom, 2 little girls were waiting. 2 little girls with his eyes. 2 little girls he never knew existed because he had been too afraid to ask a single question. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after your email, Elizabeth said quietly. I tried to reach you. Every number was disconnected. Your office said you were traveling indefinitely. Your family's lawyers sent me a cease and desist letter when I tried to contact them. The sound that escaped Robert's throat was something between a sob and a laugh. He had spent 7 years convinced he was the one who had been betrayed. 7 years building an empire to outrun his own misery. 7 years wondering if she was happy with the man he thought she had chosen over him. And all of it, every single moment of that lonely, hollow decade, had been built on a lie he told himself. Now let me take you back to the beginning of that night, to the moment Robert Alvarez walked into a charity gala, expecting nothing, and found himself face to face with everything he had lost. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel sparkled with the kind of opulence that most people only see in movies. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Champagne towers stood at attention near ice sculptures that probably cost more than the average American's monthly rent. Men in bespoke tuxedos mingled with women dripping in diamonds, all of them gathered to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Phoenix Rising Foundation. Robert Alvarez had not planned to attend. He had not been to a charity event in nearly 2 years, preferring the solitude of his penthouse to the performative generosity of the ultra-wealthy. But something about tonight had pulled at him. His assistant had mentioned the foundation's work with single mothers, had described the woman who founded it with nothing but determination and a refusal to accept that her circumstances defined her future. He had not known that woman was Elizabeth Scott. He saw her before she saw him, and the recognition hit him like a physical blow. She stood near the silent auction tables, her dark hair cascading over bare shoulders in waves he remembered tracing with his fingertips late at night when the world was quiet and she was the only thing that mattered. But she had changed. The uncertainty that had once softened her edges had been replaced by something sharper, more defined. She wore confidence like armor, dressed in an emerald gown that matched the foundation's colors, and she moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who belonged there by right, not invitation. Robert's hand tightened around his champagne flute as memories assaulted him. Lazy Sunday mornings in their apartment, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the plans they had made, the future they had dreamed of, the future he had walked away from without a word of real explanation. Then he saw them. 2 girls, maybe 6 or 7 years old, flanked Elizabeth like tiny guardians in matching lavender dresses. One had Elizabeth's smile, warm and slightly mischievous. The other studied the room with analytical intensity that Robert recognized because he saw it every morning in the mirror. His blood turned to ice. The analytical one turned, her gaze sweeping across the crowd with the patience of someone cataloging everything she observed. When her eyes met his across the room, Robert felt the floor shift beneath his feet. Those eyes, his eyes, the same unusual shade of gray-green that had made his mother call him Mi Lobo when he was a child. "My wolf," she would say, stroking his hair. "You have the eyes of someone who sees everything." This little girl had those same eyes, And right now, she was using them to study him with the same methodical attention she had given the auction items. She did not look away. Robert's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. The sound of shattering crystal cut through the ballroom's ambient noise, and several heads turned toward the source. But Robert did not notice them. He could not tear his gaze away from the little girl who was now whispering something to her sister. They both looked at him. Then they looked at Elizabeth, then back at him. Elizabeth heard the glass shatter and looked up instinctively. For a moment, her expression remained neutral, the polished mask of a woman accustomed to navigating high-stakes social situations. But then her eyes found the source of the disturbance, and Robert watched as recognition crashed over her features like a wave breaking against rocks. Her face went through a sequence of emotions so rapid they almost blurred together. Confusion, recognition, shock, then something that looked like steel being forged in real time. "Mommy," the girl with the analytical eyes whispered, loud enough that Robert could read her lips even from across the room. "That man is staring at us. The one who dropped his glass." "I know, sweetheart. He looks like the pictures in our baby books," the other girl added. "The ones you do not show us, but I found in the closet." "Is that our—" Elizabeth's hand tightened on her daughter's shoulder, silencing the question that Robert already knew the answer to. "Is that our father?" The word hung in the air between them, visible only in the way Elizabeth's spine straightened and her jaw set with determination. "Girls, I need you to stay here with Aunt Grace." Elizabeth's voice was steady, remarkable given the earthquake clearly happening inside her. She made eye contact with a woman nearby, communicating something wordless and urgent. "I need to handle something." "Is it him?" the analytical girl pressed. "Is that our father?" "Yes." Elizabeth's honesty surprised Robert. "It is, but this is not the place or time to—" "He's coming over here," the girl interrupted, her gray-green eyes tracking Robert's approach. "Should we run?" "We do not run from anything," Elizabeth replied, and Robert heard the steel in her voice even from 20 feet away. "Remember what I taught you. We face what comes." Robert barely remembered crossing the ballroom floor. One moment he was frozen in place, shattered glass at his feet. The next he was standing 3 feet from Elizabeth, close enough to smell the perfume that still haunted his dreams. Sandalwood and vanilla. She had worn it on their first date. She had worn it the last night they spent together. She was wearing it now. Elizabeth. His voice cracked on her name. Robert. Her voice was ice where his was fire. She had always been better at controlling her emotions, at presenting the face the world needed to see. It was one of the things he had loved most about her. One of the things that had made him crazy with insecurity, wondering what she was really thinking behind that composed exterior. He could not look at her. His eyes kept being pulled toward the twins, moving between their faces with an expression that combined wonder, devastation, and something that might have been recognition. The analytical one was still watching him with those unnerving gray-green eyes. The other one, the one with Elizabeth's smile, was looking back and forth between her mother and this strange man who could not seem to form a complete sentence. "How old?" Robert finally managed. The question emerged rough, barely audible. 7. In March. He did the math publicly, unable to hide the calculation happening behind his eyes. 7 years, and approximately 9 months ago, the last week, they had been together. Before the silence, before the abandonment, before everything collapsed. "They are mine." It was not a question. Biologically, Elizabeth confirmed, and her voice could have frozen the champagne in every glass within a 10-foot radius. "In every other way that matters, they are entirely mine." Robert made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. Impossible to tell which. Without caring about his expensive tuxedo, without caring about the hundreds of guests who might be watching, he sank to his knees right there in the middle of the ballroom until he was eye level with the girls who were watching him with matching expressions of cautious curiosity. "Hello," he said, and his voice broke completely. My name is Robert." "We know who you are," the analytical one replied with a directness that was wholly Elizabeth's contribution to her personality. "Mommy has pictures. She thinks they are hidden, but we found them 2 years ago." "I am Maya," she continued, apparently deciding that if introductions were happening, she might as well participate on her own terms. "That is Mia. She is older by 4 minutes, which she thinks makes her the boss." "It does make me the boss," Mia countered. "You are both." Robert's hands trembled at his sides, clearly fighting the urge to reach out and touch them, to prove they were real. You are beautiful. You are perfect. You are... He looked up at Elizabeth, and the devastation in his eyes was bottomless. Why did you not tell me? Elizabeth's expression did not change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something that might have been pain, or anger, or both. Perhaps we should have this conversation somewhere private, she said tightly. My daughters do not need to witness whatever this is about to become. Before we go behind those closed doors, before we hear the explanation that will shatter everything Robert thinks he knows, I need to talk to you for a moment. If you are still here, still listening, it means something about this story is resonating with you. Maybe you have been misunderstood. Maybe someone assumed the worst about you without giving you a chance to explain. Maybe you have made a snap judgment that you later regretted. Maybe you ran from something instead of facing it. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know that this story is about to challenge everything you think you know about betrayal, about forgiveness, about whether people can really change. If you are invested in what happens next, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you have not already, because trust me, the truth that is about to come out in that private room is going to change everything. Now, let us follow them through those doors. They found a private lounge off the main ballroom, the kind of space reserved for major donors who needed a break from performing generosity for an audience. Plush, velvet chairs in deep burgundy, city lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. A bar that probably cost more than most people's houses. Elizabeth's assistant Grace had whisked the twins away to the dessert table with promises of chocolate fountain access, giving the adults space for a conversation 7 years overdue. Robert stood by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, in a way that was almost theatrical. He had always had that quality, the ability to make ordinary moments look cinematic. At 41, he had aged in the way wealthy men do, which is to say, barely at all. Silver threaded through the dark hair at his temples. Lines had been carved around eyes that once sparkled with ambition and now seemed haunted by something Elizabeth could not quite name. She stayed near the door, arms crossed over her chest, maintaining the maximum possible distance the room allowed. The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Why? Robert finally asked without turning around. 7 years, Elizabeth. 7 years, and you never... I never what? Elizabeth's voice cut through his self-pity like a blade. Never told you about your children? Never reached out to the man who abandoned me without explanation? Never tracked down the billionaire who could not even give me the courtesy of a real goodbye? Robert turned then, and the anguish in his face was so raw she almost believed it was genuine. Almost. I did not abandon you. I left because... He stopped, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made Elizabeth's chest ache, despite her determination to feel nothing. I saw you. With him. The words hung in the air, heavy with 7 years of festering certainty. What are you talking about? The restaurant on 5th Street. 3 days before I ended things. Robert's voice had gone flat, recitational, like he was reciting facts he had memorized long ago. You were sitting at a corner table. You were wearing that blue dress I loved, the one with the silver threads, and you were holding hands across the table with a man. Dark hair, tall. He was wearing that blue jacket you always said was your favorite color. Elizabeth felt her body go very still. You were laughing, Robert continued, his voice breaking slightly. In a way you had not laughed with me in months. I remember standing outside the window, watching you, watching how animated you were, watching how he leaned in to listen to every word you said like they were the most important words in the world. His hands clenched at his sides. And then he kissed your cheek, and you smiled at him. And I knew. You knew what exactly? Elizabeth's voice was dangerously quiet. That you had found someone else. That I was already losing you. That all those late nights, all those secret smiles at your phone, all those times you seemed a million miles away, it all made sense. So you left. I left first. Before you could leave me. Before I had to hear you explain why he was better. Before I had to beg you to stay with someone you did not want anymore. Robert laughed bitterly. I thought I was making it easier. On both of us. And you never once considered asking me about it. Confronting me. Having an actual conversation. I was afraid of what you would say. Elizabeth stared at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was eerily calm. His name is Daniel. Robert's brow furrowed. I do not care what his name. Daniel Scott, Elizabeth continued as if he had not spoken. He is my half-brother. The words landed like bombs in the quiet room. You're, Robert's face went the color of ash. You're what? My half-brother. We share the same father. A man named Thomas Scott, who abandoned my mother when she was 3 months pregnant with me. A man who went on to have another child with another woman in another state. A man who abandoned that woman too when Daniel was 2 years old. Elizabeth's voice had taken on a strange, detached quality, like she was reading from a script she had memorized long ago. Daniel grew up in foster care. He bounced from home to home for 16 years. He aged out of the system with nothing, no family, no support, no connection to where he came from. He struggled with addiction for most of his 20s. He was living in a halfway house when I found him. Found him? 6 months before that dinner you were describing, I hired a private investigator. Elizabeth's arms tightened across her chest. I had always known I had a father out there somewhere, but my mother refused to talk about him. After she died, I found some documents in her things, enough to start a search, and the search led me to Daniel. Robert's legs seemed to give out. He sank onto one of the velvet chairs, his face a mask of dawning horror. The dinner you saw was only our 3rd meeting, Elizabeth continued. 3rd time I had ever sat across from my own brother. We were holding hands because we were both crying about all the years we lost, crying about the father who abandoned both of us, crying about the family we should have had and never got. The kiss on the cheek was a brother saying goodbye to a sister he had just found. Elizabeth's voice finally cracked, and she hated herself for the weakness. I was going to tell you about him that night. I had this whole plan. I was going to cook your favorite dinner. I'd put together a photo album of the pictures Daniel and I'd started collecting. I was going to explain why I had been distracted, why I had seemed distant. I was going to introduce you to the brother I never knew I had. Robert made a sound like a wounded animal. But when I got home, you were gone. Your things were gone. All that was left was a note that said you would send a more detailed explanation later. And then I got that email. She practically spat the word. That cold, corporate, impersonal email. Irreconcilable differences. Like I was a business deal that had not performed to expectations. Like 7 years of my life could be summarized in 2 words and dismissed without a single conversation. I thought I was giving you what you wanted, Robert whispered. I thought you had already moved on. I thought, you thought wrong. The words hung between them like a verdict. You saw something you did not understand, and instead of asking a single question, you created an entire narrative in your head. You decided I was cheating. You decided I had chosen someone else. You decided that leaving without an explanation was somehow kinder than having an actual conversation. Elizabeth I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after your email. Robert stopped breathing. I tried to reach you, Elizabeth continued, her voice taking on a sharp edge. Every phone number I had for you was disconnected. Your assistant said you were traveling indefinitely and could not be reached. When I tried to contact your family, his face went even paler, which Elizabeth had not thought possible. What happened when you contacted my family? Your mother's lawyers sent me a cease and desist letter. They implied that any further attempts to contact you or any member of the Alvarez family would result in legal action for harassment. I did not. Robert's voice was barely audible. I never authorized that. I did not even know. Of course you did not know. You were too busy running. Elizabeth finally moved away from the door, crossing to the window to put physical distance between them. I was in Tokyo, Robert said weakly, closing the Tanaka acquisition. My team was under strict instructions to filter out distractions. I thought you would not want to hear from me. I thought you were building a life with my brother. Say it. You thought I was building a life with my own brother. The absurdity of it seemed to hit Robert for the first time. He buried his face in his hands. What have I done? You made an assumption, Elizabeth said flatly. And then you spent 7 years letting that assumption justify everything. You never questioned it. You never reconsidered. You just ran and kept running. She turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes was so raw that Robert had to look away. And while you were running, while you were building your empire and convincing yourself that you were the one who had been wronged, I was building a life without you. I was giving birth to twins without anyone to hold my hand. I was figuring out how to be a mother and a provider and an entire support system all by myself. Elizabeth, I am so sorry. Sorry. Elizabeth laughed, but there was no humor in it. You are sorry. 7 years of raising your children alone, and you are sorry. She took a step toward him. I built Phoenix Rising from nothing. I spent my pregnancy planning how to survive. I spent my maternity leave writing grant proposals at 3 in the morning with a baby attached to each breast. I built an organization that has helped thousands of single mothers because I knew exactly how it felt to be one. Her voice rose. I raised your daughters to be kind and curious and brave. I taught them to read and ride bikes and tie their shoes. I held them when they cried about not having a father. I made up stories about why their daddy was not around because I did not want them to know the truth. What did you tell them? That you did not know they existed. That sometimes grown-ups make decisions that do not make sense to children. That their father was not a bad man, just a complicated one. She shook her head. I could have told them the truth. I could have told them their father abandoned their mother without explanation, that he never bothered to check if she was okay, that he just vanished like 7 years meant nothing. But I did not want them to grow up hating you before they ever had a chance to know you. Robert looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. You protected me. Even after everything I did, you protected me. I protected them, Elizabeth corrected. There is a difference. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of everything that could not be undone. Robert was the first to speak again. Tell me about them. Tell me about He could barely get the word out. My daughters. Elizabeth studied him for a long moment, as if deciding whether he deserved to know. Maya is the one with your eyes, she finally said. She is analytical, observant, always 3 steps ahead in any conversation. She taught herself to read at 4. She is obsessed with marine biology. She can tell you the scientific name of every species in the Pacific Ocean, but she struggles with making friends because she finds small talk pointless. That sounds... Robert almost smiled through his tears. That sounds familiar. Mia is my heart, Elizabeth continued. She feels everything deeply. She cries at commercials. She makes friends everywhere she goes. She has been taking dance classes since she was 3, and she performs for anyone who will watch, including our mailman, our neighbors, and once an entire restaurant full of strangers. Robert wiped his face with the back of his hand. I missed all of it. Every first word, every first step, every birthday, every nightmare, every moment of their lives, and I missed all of it because I was too afraid to ask one question. Yes, Elizabeth agreed. You did. She did not offer comfort. She did not soften the blow. She let the truth sit between them in all its devastating weight. What happens now? Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That depends entirely on you. Elizabeth's tone had shifted from anger to something more measured, more careful. The mother taking over from the wronged woman. I do not know what you want from this conversation. If you are looking for absolution, I cannot give it to you. If you are looking for a relationship with your children, that is something we would need to discuss carefully, with ground rules and boundaries and a lot of time. I want to know them. Robert stood up, his legs unsteady. I want to be their father. Not just a name they heard about, not just a face in old photographs. I want to be present. I want to know Maya's favorite marine animal. I want to watch Mia dance. I want to help with homework and show up at school events and be there for the scraped knees and the broken hearts. He took a step toward Elizabeth. I know I have no right to ask for any of that. I know I forfeited my place in their lives the moment I walked away from you. But Elizabeth, please, give me a chance to prove that I can be different, that I can be better. Pretty words, Elizabeth observed, and Robert flinched at the echo of her earlier accusation. But I have heard your words before. They did not mean much when you were interpreting restaurant dinners as evidence of affairs and disappearing, rather than having a single honest conversation. I know sorry does not begin to cover what I did. But Renee, I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not even asking for another chance with you. I am just asking for the opportunity to be a father to them. I will prove myself through actions, not words. Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment, weighing something in her mind. I need to tell you about our lives, she finally said. The lives you were not part of. Because if you want to be in their future, you need to understand their past. Tell me everything. Elizabeth crossed to the window, staring out at the city lights as if they held the story she was about to share. I moved to San Francisco when I was 3 months pregnant. I did not know anyone here. I had $17,000 in savings, a business degree I had never really used, and a determination to prove that I did not need anyone. Robert listened in silence. I gave birth alone. My water broke at 4 in the morning, and I took a cab to the hospital because I did not have anyone to call. I labored for 18 hours. Maya came first, then Mia. The doctors put them in my arms, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is my family. The three of us against the world. Her voice caught slightly, but she pressed on. The first year was survival. I found a part-time job with flexible hours. I put the girls in a home daycare run by a woman named Maria who became the closest thing to a grandmother they have ever known. I spent every free moment applying for grants, building business plans, learning everything I could about starting a nonprofit. How did Phoenix Rising start? With $700 and a borrowed laptop, Elizabeth turned to face him. I started by creating a Facebook group for single mothers, a support network, a place to share resources and experiences and just feel less alone. It grew faster than I expected. Women were desperate for connection, for someone who understood what they were going through. Within 6 months, I had 10,000 members. Within a year, 50,000. That is remarkable. It was necessary, Elizabeth corrected. I was building what I wished had existed when I needed it. A community, a safety net, a reminder that being alone did not mean being isolated. And from there, I started formalizing things. I applied for nonprofit status. I found pro bono lawyers willing to help with the paperwork. I wrote grants at 3 in the morning while the twins slept. And slowly, painfully, Phoenix Rising became real. She smiled slightly, and for the first time, Robert saw something other than anger in her expression. Now we have offices in 12 cities. We serve over 40,000 single mothers annually. We provide childcare assistance, job training, legal support, mental health services. We have helped women escape abusive situations. We have helped women start businesses. We have helped women believe that their circumstances do not define their futures. You did all of that while raising twins alone? I did all of that because I was raising twins alone. Elizabeth's chin lifted. They were my motivation. Every late night, every rejected grant proposal, every moment I wanted to give up, I looked at them and kept going. I built Phoenix Rising for every mother like me, but I built it because of them. Robert was quiet for a long moment, absorbing everything she had told him. And what about you? Beyond being a mother, beyond building an empire, were you happy? Elizabeth considered the question. I was content. I had work that mattered. Children I loved. A life I built from nothing. That is more than most people get. Content is not happy. Maybe not, but it is stable. And after 7 years of fighting for stability, I will take it over the chaos of chasing happiness. Robert absorbed this with visible sadness. I did that to you, made you choose survival over joy. You were part of it, Elizabeth acknowledged. But I made my own choices. I chose to leave. I chose to start over. I chose to build something that could not be taken from me. Those were my decisions. I do not regret them. Even if they cost you happiness, happiness is overrated. It is a feeling that comes and goes. Stability is what keeps you alive when feelings fail. Robert nodded slowly, and Elizabeth saw something shift in his expression. Not the desperate pleading of a few minutes ago, but something more thoughtful, more considered. And what about the twins? He asked quietly. What have you told them about being happy? I have taught them to be resilient, to find joy where they can, to rely on themselves first and others second, to be complete without needing external validation. You taught them to be like you. I taught them to survive. Elizabeth's voice was firm, but Robert heard something underneath it, something that sounded almost like doubt. Now, let us pause here, because I need to ask you something. We have just heard 2 people lay bare 7 years of pain. 7 years of assumptions and lonely nights and raising children alone. 7 years of building empires that somehow both felt hollow despite all their success. Robert thought Elizabeth betrayed him, so he ran. Elizabeth thought Robert abandoned her, so she fortified. And 2 little girls grew up without a father because their parents never had one honest conversation. Here is my question for you. Do you believe people can really change? Do you believe that someone who runs from hard conversations can learn to stay? Do you believe that walls built from pain can ever be safely demolished? Drop a comment right now telling me what you think should happen next. Should Elizabeth give Robert a chance to know his daughters? Should she protect them from potential disappointment? And if this story is resonating with something in your own life, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that the truth has the power to set us free, even when it hurts. Now, let us see what Elizabeth decides. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Grace's head appeared, her expression carefully neutral in the way of someone who knows they are walking into a complicated situation. The girls are getting restless. Maya calculated the statistical probability that the chocolate fountain would run out and became concerned about her allocation. Mia is negotiating on her behalf. Despite everything, Elizabeth smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but Robert caught it and felt something in his chest crack open. Of course she is. Tell them I will be there in 5 minutes. Grace withdrew, and the spell of the last hour seemed to partially break. They were no longer just two people confronting their past. They were co-parents who needed to make decisions about their present. I should get back to them, Elizabeth said, moving toward the door. Wait, Robert's voice stopped her. Would it be possible for me to say goodbye to them before you leave? Just briefly. I know I have no right. Stop saying you have no right. Elizabeth's voice carried an edge. We both know that is not entirely true. You are their biological father. The law gives you rights whether I like it or not. I do not care about legal rights. Robert's voice was earnest. I care about what you will allow, about what is best for them. She studied him for a long moment, this man who had shattered her world and was now looking at her with an expression that mixed hope and despair in equal measure. You can say goodbye tonight. Then, if you are serious about this, you can call me tomorrow. We will discuss what involvement might look like. She stepped closer, letting him see the steel beneath her surface. But Robert, if you commit to knowing them and then disappear again, I will destroy you. Not legally, not financially. I will make sure those girls know exactly what kind of man chose to abandon them twice. You do not get to break their hearts the way you broke mine. I will not. His voice was steady despite the tears still drying on his cheeks. I swear to you. Do not swear. Just show up. That is all that matters now. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving Robert alone with the weight of everything that had just transpired. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing, trying to comprehend how completely his understanding of the last 7 years had just been demolished. He had been wrong about everything. Elizabeth had not betrayed him. She had not chosen someone else. The man he had seen her with, the man whose existence had haunted his darkest moments, was her brother. Her brother. And because of his cowardice, because of his inability to ask one single question, he had missed 7 years of his daughter's lives. Robert walked to the window and stared out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, in this city he had never really known, his children had been living their entire lives without him. They had taken first steps and spoken first words and had first days of school. They had skinned their knees and learned to read and made friends and lost friends. They had wondered about their father, looked at old photographs, created stories to explain his absence. All because he had been too afraid to face the truth. The door opened behind him, and Robert turned to find Grace standing in the threshold. The girls are asking for you, she said simply. Robert straightened his shoulders, wiped his face one more time, and walked toward the door. It was time to meet his daughters properly. The twins were exactly where Grace had left them, perched at a table near the dessert station with empty plates that suggested they had thoroughly explored the chocolate fountain's offerings. Maya spotted him first, those gray-green eyes tracking his approach with an intensity that made Robert feel like he was being evaluated for a position he desperately wanted and was not remotely qualified for. Mia's reaction was more open. She smiled when she saw him, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and reminded Robert so strongly of Elizabeth at 23 that his heart actually hurt. Elizabeth stood behind them, watchful but not interfering. I wanted to say goodbye before you leave, Robert said, crouching down to their level. And I wanted to tell you both something. The twins exchanged a look that clearly communicated entire conversations in a single glance. Robert wondered if all twins did that, or if it was something specific to Maya and Mia. What did you want to tell us? Maya asked, her tone carefully neutral. That I am sorry. Robert held her gaze, refusing to look away despite how uncomfortable it was to be scrutinized by a 7-year-old. I did not know you existed until tonight. That is not an excuse. Your mother tried to tell me, and I was not there to listen. That is my fault. All of it. He looked at Mia, including her in his apology. I missed the first 7 years of your lives. I cannot change that, but if you will let me, I would like to be here for all the years that come next. Maya considered this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. How do we know you will not leave again? The question was blunt, brutal, and entirely fair. You do not, Robert admitted. You do not know me. You have no reason to trust me. All I can do is show up, over and over, until you believe that I am serious. But Maya, I promise you, I am not going anywhere. Not ever again. Adults break promises all the time, Maya observed. That is what Mom says. Your mom is right. Adults do break promises. Some adults are not reliable. You will have to decide for yourself whether I am one of those adults or not. All I am asking for is a chance to prove which kind I am. Maya studied him for another long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Okay. We will think about it. She returned her attention to the tablet Elizabeth must have given her, apparently satisfied that the interrogation was complete. Mia, however, had more questions. Do you have any pets? No. I travel too much. It would not be fair to an animal. You should get a fish. They do not care if you travel. Robert felt something that might have been a smile trying to form on his face. That is actually a great idea. Maybe you could help me pick one out sometime. It should be purple, Mia declared. Of course it should, Robert agreed solemnly. Elizabeth stepped forward, placing a hand on each girl's shoulder. We need to go, she said, her voice gentle but firm. It is past your bedtime. Can we see him again? Mia asked immediately. When? That is something your father and I need to discuss, Elizabeth replied, and Robert noticed she had used the word father. Not Robert, not him. Father, we will talk about it tomorrow. The twins slid off their chairs, gathering tablets and discarded sweaters with the practiced efficiency of children who were accustomed to transitions. Good night, Robert said, the word feeling inadequate for the magnitude of the moment. It was really wonderful meeting you both. Good night, Maya replied, formal and proper. Good night, Dad, Mia said, and Robert felt his heart actually stop. Dad. She had called him Dad. He looked at Elizabeth and saw his own shock reflected in her eyes. Neither of them had expected that. Neither of them knew what to do with it. Come on, girls. Elizabeth guided them toward the exit, her hands steady on their shoulders. Robert watched them go. He watched Elizabeth's straight spine and determined stride. He watched Maya's analytical glance back over her shoulder. He watched Mia skip slightly as she walked, still humming some tune only she could hear. His family. A family he had walked away from. A family he had not known existed. A family he was going to spend the rest of his life trying to deserve. Robert stood alone in that ballroom long after they had gone, surrounded by wealthy strangers and empty champagne glasses and the shattered remains of everything he thought he knew. Tomorrow, he would call Elizabeth. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. But tonight, he was just a man standing in the wreckage of his own assumptions, finally understanding the full cost of his cowardice. And for the first time in 7 years, Robert Alvarez knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted his family back. Now he just had to prove he deserved them. The flight back to San Francisco felt longer than usual. Elizabeth sat in the leather seat of her private jet, a luxury she had earned through years of relentless work, and stared out the window at the darkness below. Occasionally, city lights would appear and disappear, distant reminders that the world was still turning despite the earthquake that had just happened in her carefully constructed life. The twins had fallen asleep 20 minutes after takeoff. Maya was curled in her seat, with her tablet clutched to her chest, probably dreaming about ocean creatures and statistical probabilities. Mia had sprawled across 2 seats, her dance shoes still on, her face peaceful in a way that made Elizabeth's heart ache. She had done it. She had told Robert about the children. She had navigated the first meeting. She had established boundaries that would protect everyone involved. She should feel relieved. Instead, she felt like she had just opened a door she had spent 7 years keeping firmly locked, and she had no idea what was going to come through it. Her phone buzzed in her lap. A text from Robert. Thank you again for tonight. I meant everything I said. I will prove it. Sleep well. Elizabeth stared at the message for a long moment. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard, composing and deleting responses in her mind. Finally, she typed back. Actions, not words. See you in 2 weeks. Short, professional, giving nothing away. Exactly as it should be. She set her phone down and tried to sleep, but her mind kept replaying moments from the evening. The shock on Robert's face when he saw the twins. The way he had sunk to his knees in the middle of a crowded ballroom, not caring who was watching. the tears on his cheeks when he realized what he had lost, and underneath it all, the painful awareness that this was the Robert she had loved. Attentive, emotional, capable of real connection when he allowed himself to be vulnerable. She had forgotten he could be like this. Or maybe she had forced herself to forget, because remembering made the betrayal hurt worse. "Mommy," Mia's sleepy voice came from across the aisle. "Yes, baby? Is he nice? The man from tonight, is he nice?" Elizabeth considered the question carefully. "I do not know yet. What do you think?" "I think he seems sad, like he lost something important." "He did," Maya's voice added from her seat, apparently not as asleep as Elizabeth had thought. "He lost us for 7 years. That is a lot of losing." Out of the mouths of children, Elizabeth thought. Sometimes they saw more clearly than adults ever could. "Go back to sleep," she said gently. "We will talk more in the morning." The twins settled back into their seats, and Elizabeth returned to staring out the window at the darkness. Somewhere behind them, in a city she had deliberately left, Robert Alvarez was probably doing the same thing, staring at nothing, trying to comprehend how completely his world had shifted. Good. Let him sit with it. Let him understand what she had felt 7 years ago when she realized she was pregnant and alone. Let him earn his way back, one day at a time. The first video call happened 3 days later. Elizabeth had agreed to twice-weekly calls, 15 minutes maximum, with strict parameters. Age-appropriate conversation only. She reserved the right to end the call at any time if it seemed to be upsetting the twins. She expected it to be awkward. She was right. Robert appeared on the screen, looking like he had not slept since the gala, dark circles under his eyes, hair less perfectly styled than usual. But he was smiling, that hopeful, uncertain smile of someone who knows they are being given a chance they do not deserve. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Maya replied, her tone carefully neutral. She was sitting on the couch with her tablet in her lap, clearly prepared to multitask if this conversation proved boring. Mia, characteristically, had positioned herself directly in front of the camera. "Hi, Dad," she said brightly. "Guess what I did today?" "What did you do today?" "I learned a new dance move. Do you want to see?" "I would love to see." Mia immediately launched into a demonstration that involved a lot of spinning and arm movements that Elizabeth suspected were at least partially improvised. Robert watched with genuine attention, asking questions about technique and practice and whether this was for a specific performance. Maya observed without participating, occasionally glancing at Elizabeth as if to gauge her reaction. By the end of the 15 minutes, Mia had shown Robert 3 different dance moves, described her best friend's birthday party in exhaustive detail, and asked if he had gotten a fish yet. "Not yet," Robert admitted. "But I am looking at options. Do you have any recommendations?" "Betta fish are pretty," Mia offered. "But Maya says they are aggressive and cannot live with other fish. So maybe a goldfish instead. Except goldfish need a lot of space. So maybe..." The debate about appropriate fish species continued for another 2 minutes before Elizabeth gently ended the call. It had not been terrible. That was the most she was willing to admit. The second call was slightly less awkward. Maya actually participated this time, showing Robert a documentary she had been watching about deep-sea creatures. She explained bioluminescence with the kind of detail that most adults found overwhelming, but Robert listened like he was learning the secrets of the universe. "That is fascinating," he said when she finished. "Do you know what causes the chemical reaction that produces the light?" "It is called luciferin," Maya replied, her eyes lighting up in a way Elizabeth rarely saw outside of marine biology discussions. "It reacts with oxygen and an enzyme called luciferase. Different organisms produce different colors depending on the specific chemical structure." "I had no idea," Robert said. "You know more about this than most of the scientists I work with." Maya almost smiled. Almost. By the third call, something had shifted. Robert remembered details from previous conversations. He asked follow-up questions about the dance recital Mia had mentioned. He brought up a marine biology fact he had researched specifically because he thought Maya would find it interesting. He was paying attention. Real attention, not the performative listening of an adult humoring children until they could return to more important matters. Elizabeth watched these interactions from a careful distance, monitoring without interfering. Part of her was waiting for the mask to slip. For the Robert she remembered to emerge, the one who got distracted by work and forgot commitments and prioritized his empire over everything else. But the mask did not slip. Week after week, call after call, Robert showed up. He showed up when he was traveling. He showed up when Elizabeth knew he had major deals pending. He showed up when the twins were cranky or distracted or just not in the mood to talk. He showed up anyway, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, Elizabeth began to believe he might actually mean it. The first in-person visit happened 1 month after the gala. Robert flew to San Francisco on a Friday afternoon, texting Elizabeth when he landed, when he checked into his hotel, when he was on his way to the neutral location they had agreed on for the meeting. The California Academy of Sciences. Maya's choice. Elizabeth had given the twins the option of where to spend the day, expecting some negotiation between Maya's scientific interests and Mia's more performance-oriented preferences. But Mia had immediately agreed to the aquarium, perhaps sensing that this was an opportunity for her sister to shine. They were good like that, Elizabeth thought. They looked out for each other. Robert arrived 15 minutes early. Elizabeth spotted him pacing near the entrance, checking his phone repeatedly, clearly nervous. When he saw them approaching, his whole face transformed. "Hey," he greeted them, crouching down to twin level. "Ready to see some fish? I'm going to show you the Philippine Coral Reef exhibit first," Maya announced, apparently having prepared an itinerary. It is 4 stories tall and contains 4,000 animals. The flooded rainforest above it is one of only 3 in the world. "Lead the way," Robert said. What followed was 3 hours of Maya explaining marine ecosystems with the confidence of a tenured professor. She guided Robert through exhibits, corrected tour guides who oversimplified concepts, and delivered impromptu lectures on everything from cephalopod intelligence to the ecological importance of kelp forests. Robert listened to every word. He asked questions that demonstrated he was actually paying attention, not just nodding along. He admitted when he did not understand something. He treated Maya's expertise with respect, not condescension. By the end of the aquarium tour, Maya was actually holding his hand. Elizabeth pretended not to notice. Mia, meanwhile, had been content to drift between exhibits, finding the most colorful fish and the most dramatic presentations. She had appointed herself the official photographer, using Elizabeth's phone to document everything Maya deemed important, and also several things Maya deemed completely irrelevant. After the aquarium, they stopped for lunch at a casual restaurant near the museum. The kind of place where crayons came with the children's menu and the noise level made adult conversation challenging. "This is amazing," Robert said as he watched the twins color their placemats with concentration. Being here with them, seeing how Maya's mind works, watching Mia find joy in everything. He looked at Elizabeth, and for a moment his guard dropped completely. "Thank you for this, for letting me be here." "You are doing well with them," Elizabeth admitted. "Better than I expected. I have been practicing." "Practicing what?" "Being present." Robert set down his menu. "For the last month, every time I catch myself thinking about work during a call with them, I force myself to refocus. Every time I feel the urge to check my phone or let my mind wander, I remind myself that this moment matters more than any deal or meeting or acquisition." He shrugged slightly. "It is not easy. I spent 15 years training myself to multitask, to always be thinking 3 steps ahead, to never fully inhabit any single moment. Unlearning that is hard. But you are doing it. I am trying, because they deserve someone who actually sees them, not someone who is physically present, but mentally somewhere else." Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. The food arrived, and conversation shifted to the twins' upcoming school week. Alexander's science fair project about bridge engineering, Lily's dance recital the following month. "Wait," Robert said. "Mia, you have a recital next month?" "Yes." Mia's face lit up. "It is the spring showcase. I have a solo, well, sort of a solo. It is only 8 counts, but still." "When is it?" "March 15th. Robert pulled out his phone and made a note. "I will be there." Mia's eyes went wide. "Really? You will come?" "If your mom says it is okay, I would not miss it." Mia looked at Elizabeth with so much hope that Elizabeth felt something crack in her chest. "We will see," she said carefully. "We will talk about it closer to the date." It was not a yes, but it was not a no either. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Robert visited San Francisco every other weekend. He video called the twins 3 times a week instead of the agreed-upon 2, though he always asked permission first. He sent thoughtful gifts for no particular reason, things that showed he was paying attention. A book about underwater photography for Maya. A new dance bag for Mia with her name embroidered on it. Never excessive. Never trying to buy their affection. Just small reminders that he was thinking about them even when he was not there. Elizabeth watched all of this with the vigilance of someone expecting disappointment. It did not come. 3 months after that first gala, Robert made an announcement. They were having dinner at Elizabeth's house, something that had become almost routine. Robert cooking while Elizabeth supervised homework, the twins setting the table with the seriousness of tiny restaurant staff. "I have some news," Robert said as they sat down to eat. "I have been restructuring my company, delegating more responsibilities to my executive team." He paused, looking at Elizabeth, as if gauging how she would react. "I've decided to open a San Francisco office for Alvarez Technologies. It will be small at first, just a satellite location, but it means I can spend more time here. Maybe 3 weeks out of every month instead of just weekends." The twins erupted. "Really?" Mia practically shouted. "You are going to live here?" "Close by," Robert clarified. "I found a house in Pacific Heights. I close on it next month." Elizabeth felt her heart rate increase. "That is a big change," she said carefully. "It is the right change." Robert's eyes met hers, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch. "My company can function without me micromanaging every decision. I built it to be self-sustaining for exactly this reason. But Maya and Mia, they are only 7 once. I have already missed so much. I do not want to miss any more. What about your life in New York? Your friends, your routine, everything you have built there?" "I did not have much of a life in New York." Robert's voice was honest in a way that clearly cost him something to admit. "Just work. The few friends I had were really business associates who have mostly fallen away since I started traveling here so much. There is nothing tying me to New York except habit and inertia." He looked at the twins, who were watching this exchange with barely contained excitement. "Here, I have my children. That is everything." It was exactly the right answer. And it terrified Elizabeth completely. Because if Robert relocated to San Francisco, if he became a permanent fixture in their daily lives, the careful distance she had maintained would become impossible. She would have to actually deal with her feelings instead of compartmentalizing them into bi-weekly visits that were easy to control. "When would this happen?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "I'm hoping to be settled within 2 months. I wanted to tell you first, make sure it was okay. You do not need my permission to move to San Francisco. It is a free country. No, but I need you to be comfortable with it. If this is too much, too fast, I can slow down the timeline." Elizabeth looked at the twins, who were practically vibrating with hope. She looked at Robert, who had spent 3 months proving himself reliable and consistent. She looked at the life she had built that suddenly felt less like protection and more like limitation. "Do it," she said. "Move here. Be close to them. They deserve that." The smile that spread across Robert's face was almost painful to witness. "Thank you," he said. "I will not let you down. I know you will not." The words surprised her. She had not planned to say them, but somehow, over the past 3 months, she had started to believe them. That night, after Robert left and the twins were asleep, Elizabeth found herself in the kitchen, staring at nothing, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Her assistant and closest friend, Grace, found her there 20 minutes later. "You are thinking very loudly," Grace observed, pouring herself tea and settling at the kitchen table. "Want to share, or should I just guess?" "He is moving here." Elizabeth finally sat down across from her. "Opening a San Francisco office. He will be here 3 weeks out of every month. And how do you feel about that?" "I do not know." Elizabeth wrapped her hands around the cold tea. "Terrified. Hopeful. Both simultaneously. He has been everything I hoped he would be as a father. Consistent, present, genuinely engaged. The twins adore him. This should be good news. But it means I cannot keep him at arm's length anymore. I cannot pretend this is just about co-parenting when he is going to be a permanent fixture in our daily lives. I'm going to have to actually examine what I feel about him beyond just whether he is good for the children." "And what do you feel about him?" Grace asked gently. Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment. "I do not hate him anymore," she finally said. "I did for a long time. But watching him with Maya and Mia, seeing how he has changed, how he prioritizes them over everything else, it is hard to maintain hatred in the face of genuine transformation. That is not what I asked." "I know what you asked." Elizabeth looked down at her tea. "I am just not ready to answer it honestly, because the answer scares you. Because the answer means I might have to risk something I swore I would never risk again. My heart, my trust, my belief that people can choose me and stay chosen. He broke all of that 7 years ago. What if he breaks it again? What if he does not? Grace leaned forward. What if he has actually become the man you needed him to be back then? Are you going to punish him forever for who he was, or give him credit for who he has become? It was the question Elizabeth had been avoiding for months. I do not know if I can do it, she whispered. I do not know if I can be that vulnerable again. You do not have to decide tonight. Grace's voice was gentle but firm. But eventually you will have to decide something. Living in this limbo, not moving forward, not letting go, that is just another kind of prison. You survived what he did to you. You built an empire from nothing. You raised 2 incredible children alone. You are strong enough to risk your heart again, if you choose to. The question is whether you are brave enough. The words settled over Elizabeth like a challenge. She had thought surviving was the brave part. But maybe staying safe was actually the coward's choice. Maybe real courage meant risking pain for the possibility of something better than mere contentment. Before we continue with what happens next, I need to pause and talk to you directly. We have watched Robert prove himself for 3 months now. We have seen him show up for every call, every visit, every opportunity to be present. We have seen him restructure his entire life to be closer to his children, and we have watched Elizabeth's walls slowly begin to crack. Here is what I want to know from you. Do you believe Robert has really changed? Or is this all just an extended performance that will eventually fade when the novelty wears off? Drop a comment right now with your answer. I want to know what you think. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button because what happens next is going to test everything we think we know about trust and second chances. Now let me tell you about the moment that changed everything. It happened 4 months after the gala. Robert had been settling into his new San Francisco life, learning the rhythms of a city he had never really known. He had his new house, a beautiful craftsman-style home in Pacific Heights that he was slowly turning into a space the twins would feel comfortable visiting. He had his satellite office, small but functional, allowing him to manage his empire from 3,000 miles away. And he had Mia's dance recital marked on his calendar in bold letters with 3 reminder alarms. The morning of March 15th, Robert woke to 17 urgent emails from his executive team in New York. A hostile takeover attempt. Marcus Whitfield, a rival tech mogul Robert had tangled with years ago, was making a move on Alvarez Technologies. He had been quietly acquiring shares for months, and now he was close enough to mounting a serious challenge. The board was panicking. His CFO was on a plane to New York. His lawyers were drafting emergency motions. Everyone was demanding that Robert return immediately. Get me on the next flight, his assistant urged over the phone. The board meeting is at 6. If you are not there in person, Whitfield is going to use your absence as evidence that you have lost focus on the company. I cannot leave today, Robert said. Sir, with all due respect, this is the company. Everything you have built for 15 years. I know what it is. Robert stared at himself in the bathroom mirror. He looked tired. He felt torn in a way he had never experienced before. And I know what today is. Mia's dance recital is at 4. I promised her I would be there. Sir, handle the board. Explain that I will join by video conference immediately after the recital. We can schedule an emergency meeting for later tonight, my time. I will fly to New York first thing tomorrow morning if necessary. There was silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure about this? Robert thought about Mia's face when he had promised to attend. The way her eyes had lit up. The hope in her voice when she asked if he was really going to come. I am sure, he said. There is always a crisis. There is only one first dance recital. He ended the call and started getting ready for the day. Elizabeth had not expected Robert to actually show up. When she had reluctantly agreed to let him attend the recital, she had assumed something would come up. Work emergency, travel complications, the kind of last-minute cancellation that she had learned to expect from the men in her life. But here he was, sitting in the audience of the community center auditorium, his phone conspicuously turned off and tucked in his jacket pocket. He had arrived 15 minutes early. He had a bouquet of flowers waiting in his car for afterward. I thought you would have to cancel, Elizabeth said quietly, sliding into the seat next to him. Your assistant called me earlier. Something about a hostile takeover? The company will survive, Robert replied. Mia's first recital will not happen again. Elizabeth studied his profile in the dim light. You chose this over your company. I chose my daughter over a meeting. Robert's voice was steady, certain. The deal will either work out or it will not. Marcus Whitfield has been trying to take my company for a decade. He has not succeeded yet. But Mia believing that her father will show up when he says he will, that is something I cannot delegate or reschedule. The lights dimmed further, and the recital began. Elizabeth found herself unable to focus on the performances leading up to Mia's group number. She kept glancing at Robert, watching his face as he watched the stage. He was genuinely present, not checking his phone under his seat, not mentally composing responses to the crisis waiting for him back in New York. Just here, in this moment, waiting to watch his daughter dance. When Mia's group finally took the stage, Elizabeth felt Robert tense beside her. Mia stood near the back of the formation, one of the younger dancers in the group. She was wearing a purple costume that sparkled under the lights, her hair pulled back in a bun that Elizabeth had spent 20 minutes perfecting that afternoon. The music started, and the dancers began to move. Mia hit every mark. Her 8 counts of solo time came near the middle of the piece, and she nailed it. Perfect timing, confident movements, a smile so bright it was visible even from the back of the auditorium. When the song ended and the dancers took their bows, Robert was on his feet before anyone else. Mia spotted him from the stage. She waved. The entire audience laughed. Robert waved back, and Elizabeth felt something shift inside her that she had been fighting against for months. After the recital, Mia came running out of the backstage area, still in her costume, makeup slightly smudged, grinning from ear to ear. "You came," she said, launching herself at Robert with enough force to nearly knock him over. "You really came. I told you I would." Robert hugged her tight, then pulled back to look at her face. "You were amazing. That solo was perfect. I am so proud of you. Did you see when I almost wobbled on the turn? I saw you recover perfectly. That is what professionals do." Maya appeared behind them, more reserved but clearly pleased. "You came," she said, and her voice held something like surprise. "I would not have missed it. Mom said you might have to cancel because of your work." Robert looked at Elizabeth, then back at Maya. "My work is not more important than you." "Nothing is." Maya studied him with those analytical eyes, processing this information. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said simply, and Elizabeth understood that this was high praise from Maya. This was acceptance. The drive home was filled with Mia's excited chatter about the recital, about which dances were her favorites, about the backstage drama between the older dancers, about the possibility of having pizza for dinner to celebrate. Robert kept his phone off the entire time. Later, after the twins were in bed, Elizabeth walked Robert to the door. "Thank you for today," she said. It meant a lot to them. To Mia especially. It meant a lot to me too. Robert paused in the doorway. "Elizabeth, I know I still have a lot to prove. I know one recital does not erase 7 years. But I want you to know that I meant what I said. Nothing is more important than them. Not my company. Not my reputation. Not any deal or crisis or emergency. They come first. Always." Elizabeth was quiet for a moment. "You might lose the deal," she finally said. "Marcus Whitfield is not someone who gives up easily." "Then I will lose the deal." Robert's voice was steady. "I would rather lose a deal than lose another moment with my children. I would rather Marcus Whitfield take everything I built than have Mia standing on that stage looking for me and not finding me there." He shrugged slightly. "Besides, I do not think I will lose. I have very good people working for me. They can handle one night without my physical presence. And if they can't, then I will rebuild. I have done it before." He met Elizabeth's eyes, and something passed between them that neither was ready to name. "Good night, Elizabeth." "Good night, Robert." She watched him walk to his car. She watched his taillights disappear down the street. And she stood in her doorway for a long time afterward, thinking about the kind of man who would risk everything he had built for 8 counts of a 7-year-old's dance recital. The following months confirmed what that night had suggested. Robert did not lose the deal. His team had handled the crisis, and Marcus Whitfield had eventually been outmaneuvered through a combination of legal strategy and shareholder loyalty. But Robert had been prepared to lose. He had made his choice without knowing the outcome. That meant something. 6 months after the gala, Robert was a permanent fixture in their lives. He had dinner at Elizabeth's house twice a week. He picked the twins up from school on days when Elizabeth had foundation obligations. He coached Maya through her first science fair project, a detailed analysis of tidal patterns, and he sat through every one of Mia's dance classes, learning the terminology so he could give informed feedback afterward. He was not just showing up. He was showing up well, and Elizabeth's walls were crumbling faster than she could rebuild them. She caught herself smiling at things he said during video calls with the twins. She found herself looking forward to his visits, not just for the twins' sake, but for her own. She noticed how he had changed, more patient, more present, more willing to be vulnerable than the man she had known 7 years ago. One evening, she stood in the doorway of her living room and watched Robert help Maya with homework. Their heads were bent together over marine biology textbooks, Robert asking questions and Maya explaining concepts with an enthusiasm she rarely showed anyone outside her immediate family. Robert laughed at something Maya said, and Maya laughed back. Elizabeth felt her heart crack open. This was what she had wanted for them. A father who showed up. A father who participated. A father who made ordinary moments special, just by being present. But it was also dangerous. Because the more Robert proved himself, the more she had to confront her own walls and ask whether they were still protecting her or had become a prison. The breakthrough came 8 months after the gala. It was a routine evening, nothing special about it. Robert was in the kitchen helping cook dinner while the twins set the table with their usual seriousness. Maya was carrying plates to the dining room when she stumbled. The plate slipped from her hands. It shattered on the hardwood floor. A shard of ceramic sliced across Maya's finger, and blood immediately began to well. "Dad!" she cried out, and then she froze. Everyone froze. It was the first time Maya had called him that. Not Robert. Not you. Dad. Robert moved before anyone else could react. He was at Maya's side in seconds, calm and steady, finding the first aid kit without being told where it was. He examined the cut with gentle hands, cleaned it carefully, applied antibiotic ointment and a bandage with the precision of someone who had clearly researched how to handle exactly this situation. "Let me see, sweetheart. It is okay. I have got you." His voice was thick with emotion he was trying to control. "Better?" Maya looked at her bandaged finger. Then she looked at Robert. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Thanks, Dad." She used it again. Deliberately. Mia, not to be outdone, immediately adopted the new terminology. "Dad, can we have pizza instead of whatever you are cooking? Pizza does not make people cut their fingers." Robert had to turn away for a moment. Elizabeth saw him wiping his eyes. Dinner continued, but something was different. Something fundamental had shifted. The twins called him Dad throughout the meal, and every time they said it, Robert's face did something complicated that Elizabeth could not quite read. After dinner, after bedtime stories, after the twins were finally asleep, Robert and Elizabeth stood in the kitchen, the silence between them heavy with everything that had just happened. "She called you Dad," Elizabeth said. "She did." Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "How did that feel? Like the last 8 months mattered. Like I might actually deserve this. Like maybe, possibly, I have not completely destroyed everything. You have not." The words surprised both of them. "Elizabeth," Robert said, and his voice cracked on her name. "I do not." "You have earned it," she continued, cutting him off. "The title, the relationship, all of it. You've shown up every single day. You have made them a priority. You have been the father they deserve. That is not nothing, Robert. That is everything." He stared at her for a long moment. "And what about you? What about me? Have I earned anything with you? Or am I still just the man who broke your heart 7 years ago?" The question hung between them. Elizabeth could deflect. She could retreat behind her walls. She could maintain the careful distance that had kept her safe for so long. Or she could be brave. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Not as the mother of your children, just as me. Anything. Do you still? Is there still?" She could not finish the sentence. Robert understood anyway. "I have loved you every single day since I walked away," he said, and his voice was raw with honesty. "I regretted leaving you more than any decision I have ever made. Every relationship I attempted in those 7 years failed because I was comparing everyone to you. You were the standard no one could meet." He took a breath. "But I did not come back for you. I came back for them. Because you were right. What I want does not matter. What they need does. What if what they need includes seeing that broken things can be repaired?" Elizabeth stepped closer. "What if they need to see their parents not just coexisting, but actually trying again? What if they need to learn that mistakes do not have to be permanent, that people can choose differently, that second chances are real? Are you saying?" "I am saying I do not hate you anymore." Elizabeth met his eyes. "Watching you with them, seeing how hard you try, how consistently you show up, it is hard to maintain hatred in the face of genuine change. That is not love, no. But it might be the foundation for something. Eventually, if you are patient, Robert's breath caught. I have nothing but patience. I will wait as long as you need. I will prove myself every day until you believe I deserve another chance. Or until you tell me to stop. Either way, I am not running. Not ever again. Elizabeth looked at this man who had shattered her world and then spent 8 months rebuilding himself into someone capable of deserving forgiveness. Stay, she said quietly. For coffee. The girls are asleep. We could talk about something other than pickup schedules and parent-teacher conferences. The smile that transformed Robert's face made him look younger, lighter, more like the man she had fallen in love with before everything went wrong. I would like that, he said. I would like that very much. And so they talked. They talked for hours, long after the coffee went cold, and the city lights outside the window blurred into streaks of gold and white. They talked about who they had become in their years apart. They talked about what they wanted from life now that they had both achieved the success they had been chasing. It felt different than it had 7 years ago, more grounded, less desperate. They were not two young people trying to prove something to the world. They were two adults who had survived heartbreak, who had built separate lives, who were now choosing carefully and intentionally to see if those lives might fit together. The ending did not come with fireworks or grand gestures. It came with quiet, daily choices. Robert showing up for Sunday dinners, Elizabeth inviting him to foundation events as her partner, not just the twins' father. Late-night conversations after the children were asleep, talking about dreams and fears and the work of building trust from rubble. A year after that first gala, they stood together at another Phoenix Rising event, watching Maya and Mia charm donors with stories about marine biology projects and dance competitions. Robert's arm was around Elizabeth's waist. Casual, comfortable, like it belonged there. We did okay, Robert said quietly. Did we not? We did better than okay, Elizabeth replied. We did real, messy and imperfect and absolutely real. We turned the worst thing into something better. I love you, he said, simple and true. I love you too, she replied. Still, again, earned through every difficult moment and every choice to stay. The story did not end there. Real stories never truly end. They continue and evolve and face new challenges, but they face those challenges together, rebuilding trust, choosing each other daily, proving that second chances were real when both people were willing to change. One Sunday morning, a year and a half after everything began, they sat in Robert's kitchen. Pancakes were being made. Maya was reading a marine biology journal at the table. Mia was dancing to music only she could hear. Normal, ordinary, everything they had almost lost. Some stories end with weddings and declarations and happily ever afters tied up in neat bows. But the best endings are the quiet ones. The Sunday mornings, the pancakes, the daughter calling you dad like she has always done it, the woman you love handing you a cup of coffee and asking how you slept, the life you nearly threw away held in your hands like something precious, something earned, something you will never take for granted again. This is what Robert and Elizabeth built from the ashes of misunderstanding. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, just real life with all its mess and magic, chosen daily, tended carefully, loved fiercely. And somewhere in that kitchen over pancakes and coffee and the sound of children laughing, they both knew the truth. Everything they lost had taught them how to hold what they found. Because in the end, that is what second chances are for, not to erase the past, but to prove it does not have to define the future. Now let me leave you with this. Somewhere in your life, there is probably an assumption you have made that you have never questioned. There is probably a conversation you have avoided because you are afraid of what you might hear. There is probably a wall you have built that might be keeping out the very thing you need most. What if you are wrong about something and finding out could change everything? If this story moved you, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that like button. Do not scroll past it. Every like tells me that these stories matter, that the hours I spend crafting them are worth it. Second, subscribe to Mr. Dawson's Stories and hit the notification bell. I create content like this every week. Stories about love and loss, redemption and resilience, the messy, beautiful work of being human. Third, and this is the most important one, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone who has been hurt. Maybe someone who made a mistake and thinks they cannot come back from it. Maybe someone who is building walls instead of bridges. Let them know it is not too late. it is never too late. Until next time, I'm Mr. Dawson, reminding you that the best stories are not the ones where everything is perfect. They are the ones where everything falls apart and people choose to rebuild anyway. See you in the next story.